This Miriam was an unappealing girl with blurry lipstick and masses of rough red hair. She wore a short, bulky jacket that would not have been out of place on a motorcycle. During the trip to Cal, she was silent, but coming back, she was more talkative. What a neat guy, and what a house. All those kids hanging out like a club, and the stereo playing rock. Gosh, he's not like a grown up at all. Married and divorced and everything, but you'd think he was our own age. Mr. Beetle was married? Daisy asked. Yeah, to this really controlling lady. She didn't understand him a bit. No, I guess not, Daisy said. Spring came and the students who hung around at Cal's drifted out to the basketball net above the garage. Sometimes when Daisy and Matt arrived to pick up Donnie, they'd find him there with the others, spiky and excited, jittering on his toes beneath the backboard. It was staying light much longer now, and the neighboring fence cast narrow bars across the bright grass. Loud music would be spilling from Cal's windows. It was The Who, which Daisy recognized from the time that Donnie had borrowed the album Teenage Wasteland. She said aloud, identifying the song, and Matt gave a short, dry laugh. It certainly is, he said. I highlighted this statement from Matt, it certainly is, in blue, because that's something that you can include in your chart. He's referring to Donnie's setup that he's got going on with all these misfit burnout kids hanging out. So Matt refers to the property as a teenage wasteland. He'd misunderstood. He thought she was commenting on the scene spread before them. In fact, she might have been. The players looked like hoodlums, even her son. Why, one of Cal's students had recently been knifed in a tavern. One had been shipped off to boarding school in midterm. Two had been withdrawn by their parents. On the other hand, Donnie had mentioned someone who'd been studying with Cal for 5 years. 5 years, said Daisy. Doesn't anyone ever stop needing him? Donnie looked at her. Lately, whatever she said about Cal was read as criticism. You're just feeling competitive, he said, and controlling. She bit her lip and said no more. In April, the principal called to tell her that Donnie had been expelled. There had been a locker check, and in Donnie's locker they found 5 cans of beer and half a pack of cigarettes. With Donnie's previous record, this offense meant expulsion. Daisy gripped the receiver tightly and said, Well, where is he now? We've sent him home, said Mr. Lenham. He's packed up all his belongings, and he's coming home on foot. Daisy wondered what she would say to him. She felt him looming closer and closer, bringing this brand new situation that no one had prepared her to handle. What other place would take him? Could they enter him in public school? What were the rules? She stood at the living room window waiting for him to show up. Gradually, she realized that he was taking too long. She checked the clock. She stared up the street again. When an hour had passed, she phoned the school. Mr. Lanham's secretary answered and told her in a grave, sympathetic voice that yes, Donnie Coble had most definitely gone home. Daisy called her husband. He was out of the office. She went back to the window and thought a while, and then she called Donnie's tutor. Donnie's been expelled from school, she said, and now I don't know where he's gone. I wonder if you'd heard from him? There was a long silence. Donnie's with me, Mrs. Coble, he finally said. With you? How'd he get there? He hailed a cab, and I paid for the driver. Could I speak to him, please? There was another silence. Maybe it'd be better if we had a conference, Cal said. I don't want a conference. I've been standing at the window picturing him dead or kidnapped or something, and now you tell me you wanna... Donnie is very, very upset. Understandably so, said Cal. Believe me, Mrs. Coble, this is not what it seems. Have you asked Donnie's side of the story? Well, of course not. How could I? He went running off to you instead. Because he didn't feel he'd be listened to. But I haven't even... Why don't you come out and talk? The 3 of us, said Cal. We'll try to get this thing in perspective. Well, all right, said Daisy, but she wasn't as reluctant as she sounded. Already she felt soothed by the calm way Cal was taking this. Cal answered the doorbell at once. He said, Hi there, and led her into the dining room. Donnie sat slumped in a chair, chewing the knuckle of one thumb. Hello, Donnie, Daisy said. He flicked his eyes in her direction. Sit here, Mrs. Coble, said Cal, placing her opposite Donnie. He himself remained standing, restlessly pacing. So, he said. Daisy stole a look at Donnie. His lips were swollen, as if he'd been crying. You know, Cal told Daisy, I kind of expected something like this. That's a very punitive school you've got him in. You realize that. And any half decent lawyer will tell you they've violated his civil rights. Locker checks? Where's their search warrant? But if the rule is, Daisy said, well, anyhow, let him tell you his side. She looked at Donnie. He said, it wasn't my fault, I promise. They said your locker was full of beer. It was a put-up job. See, there's this guy that doesn't like me. He put all these beers in my locker and started a rumor going, so Mr. Lanham ordered a locker check. What was the boy's name? Daisy asked. Huh? Mrs. Cobalt, take my word, the situation is not so unusual, Cal said. You can't imagine how vindictive kids can be sometimes. What was the boy's name? Said Daisy, so that I can ask Mr. Lanham if that's who suggested he run a locker check. You don't believe me, Donnie said. And how'd this boy get your combination in the first place? Frankly, said Cal, I wouldn't be surprised to learn the school was in on it. Any kid that marches to a different drummer, why, they just love an excuse to get rid of him. The school is where I lay the blame. Doesn't Donnie ever get blamed? Now, Mrs. Coble, you heard what he... Forget it, Donnie told Cal. You can see she doesn't trust me. Daisy drew in a breath to say that of course she trusted him, a reflex. But she knew that bold-faced, wide-eyed look of Donnie's. He had worn that look when he was small, denying some petty misdeed with the evidence plain as day all around him. Still, it was hard for her to accuse him outright. She temporized and said, the only thing I'm sure of is that they've kicked you out of school, and now I don't know what we're going to do. So I highlighted this in purple because it just made me stop and think about whether or not Donnie really is at fault here. She said that his expression was the same as when he was young. He would deny some misdeed, but the evidence was plain as day. We'll fight it, said Cal. We can't. Even you must see we can't. I could apply to Brantley, Donnie said. Cal stopped his pacing to beam down at him. Brantley! Yes, they're really on to where a kid is coming from at Brantley. Why, I could get you into Brantley. I work with a lot of their students. Daisy had never heard of Brantley, but already she didn't like it. And she didn't like Cal's smile, which struck her now as feverish and avid, a smile of hunger. On the 15th of April, they entered Donnie in a public school, and they stopped his tutoring sessions. Donnie fought both decisions bitterly. Cal, surprisingly enough, did not object. He admitted he'd made no headway with Donnie and said it was because Donnie was emotionally disturbed. Donnie went to his new school every morning, plodding off alone with his head down. He did his assignments, and he earned average grades, but he gathered no friends, joined no clubs. There was something exhausted and defeated about him. The first week in June, during final exams, Donnie vanished. He simply didn't come home one afternoon, and no one at school remembered seeing him. The police were reassuring, and for the first few days they worked hard. They combed Donnie's sad, messy room for clues. They visited Miriam and Cal, but then they started talking about the number of kids who ran away every year. Hundreds just in this city. He'll show up if he wants to, they said. If he doesn't, he won't. Evidently, Donnie didn't want to. It's been 3 months now and still no word. Matt and Daisy still look for him in every crowd of awkward, heartbreaking teenage boys. Every time the phone rings, they imagine it might be Donnie. Both parents have aged. Donnie's sister seems to be staying away from home as much as possible. At night, Daisy lies awake and goes over Donnie's life. She is trying to figure out what went wrong, where they made their first mistake. Often, she finds herself blaming Cal, although she knows he didn't begin it. Then at other times, she excuses him, for without him, Donnie might have left earlier. Who really knows? In the end, she can only sigh and search for a cooler spot on the pillow. As she falls asleep, she occasionally glimpses something in the corner of her vision. It's something fleet and round, a ball, a basketball. It flies up, it sinks through the hoop, descends, lands in a yard littered with last year's leaves and striped with bars of sunlight as white as bones. bleached and parched and cleanly picked.